Hi, I'm Glyn Dewis. Welcome to episode 60 of my weekly show. Can't believe we're at 60 already. Now, this week what I'm going to do is go through a complete retouch. Like we did last time, seemed to go down really well with you guys. So we're going to go from start to finish on this recent portrait that I did of a chimpanzee that I originally photographed down at the Monkey World Ape Rescue Centre in Dorset here in the UK. Now, just a few things to mention, 3 things in fact, before we get on with the actual retouching this week. The first one is that this video is split into 2 parts, and the reason for that is there's quite a few retouching steps, and what I don't want to do is create a video that goes on and on and on. We can only take in so much in any one given time, so we're going to split it into 2. The first video, I'm going to show you what I did to this picture in Lightroom, what I did to the outer camera shot first of all in Lightroom, that you can also do in Camera Raw, and then we'll take it over into Photoshop and I'll show you how I then added in that fake white seamless background and all those very, very faint out of focus light kind of really fine hairs that went around our chimpanzee Zeyden. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that at the very, very start, once I've finished, there's a short video of maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or so that shows you how I originally photographed Zeyden when we were at the Ape Rescue Centre, and it was kindly videoed by my good friend Ray Fiddler. So check that out. That just gives you an idea of how you can photograph through that very thick and sometimes very dirty safety glass. And finally, obviously every week it's really great that you guys subscribe to this channel, which I'm going to obviously suggest that you do that anyway if you haven't. But this week I'd just like you to share it. You know, wherever you're watching this video, be it on my blog, on YouTube, Facebook, Google+, click on that share button and let other people know about it. That's all I ask. If you see it on Twitter, do us a quick retweet, and I'd really appreciate it. But hey, that's enough from me. Let's dive into the main part of the video. Right, before we get into the tutorial, just one little thing to show you about how I actually took the picture you can see on screen now. It's with my Canon here with a 70-200, but just taking off the little lens cover there and just pushing the lens right up against the glass and then taking the shot. You're still going to get some kind of smudging on this, but it's better to take it off and push it against the glass than having loads of reflection. So that shows you how I did the shot. Now let's get on with the retouching. Alright, so here's our kind of out of camera picture. I mean, the first things to do really is to correct the obvious, is to actually work on the cropping and also bringing up the exposure. So we're going to pop over to the develop module, and the first thing I'll do then is just press the R key so we can actually go to the crop here, and I'm going to bring this down just to go right to the top of her head and to bring it in onto the left, somewhere like that. We'll bring up the bottom to around about there. Now the left hand side is pretty much irrelevant really, because that's going to be white later on, and we're going to be able to extend the canvas later. So I might kind of just bring that in fairly tight. This is purely when I press return or enter, just to give me an idea now of what it is I'm working on, rather than being distracted by anything else in the picture that in the end is never going to be there. So once I've got my crop, the next thing I'll do is actually work on the obvious, like the exposure. So let's just drop the exposure down just to start to bring the picture back how it should be. Now the reason it's been so kind of like overly exposed, there's a couple of reasons for that, I guess really. First one is because we're shooting through that really thick and dirty kind of security glass or safety glass, and also the fact that I actually bracketed the exposure when I was taking these shots of Zeyden, our chimp here. So that's exposure down. Don't go too far with that. I'm also going to bring up the blacks as well, so that we're kind of getting a really good histogram over here, bringing the blacks right over to the left-hand side. Now, one thing I don't do is, you know, check the black and the white point. I'm generally doing this now by sight. Is what actually what I like the look of, as opposed to what is perfect by actually testing out where the black and white points are. So I hope that makes sense. So at the moment now, then we've got kind of this picture of Zeyden, our chimp, how she actually was when we were taking the picture. Okay, this is the actual kind of tones, the colour, everything is now exactly how it should be. So the next thing I'm doing, once I've got the exposure right, is I think we can start to bring out some of that texture and detail on her face. So I think what I'm going to do now is add some clarity. But what I don't want to do is add lots of clarity to the picture so that it goes onto the bottom half of her body here, or should I say the sort of bottom area down here. The main part that's in focus is the face. That's where we want to draw the attention to. So rather than using the clarity slider, I'm going to get an adjustment brush. We can see that all the sliders here are at their default default of 0 positions. Then I'm just going to increase the clarity just a touch. I'm not going to worry about using the auto mask down here, but what I am going to do is make sure that the overlay is visible. So now when I paint over just this part here of her face that's kind of like the sharpest and the most sort of contrasty, we're going to work on that area. Then I can see that now very, very clearly using that overlay. Once I've kind of painted in the areas that I want it, I think I might just use the erase just to bring it off this part of the fur just on the either side, so it comes in a little bit more shape there, something like that. I'll then press O to remove the overlay, and then I can come in real time and play around with the clarity just to see how much I want. The great thing about this portrait here that I find is that I wanted it to appear as though her face was coming towards the viewer. That is why there's got more sharpness and more contrast and that part, and the rest of the picture is kind of like going off into a blur. The depth of field is working so that her face is going to really come out towards them. We can really work on that in the second part of the picture, but there's quite a bit we can do here just for now to give us a good starting point. So we'll bring up the clarity. I might just bring down the highlights just a touch. I don't want those to be too strong, so something like that. And we can do the backslash key now just to see the before and after. That's looking good. And then the next thing is the obvious one again, is her eyes. This picture is very much about her eyes. So we'll click on new to get a new brush. I'll just double click on the word effect just to reset those, and I'm just going to press O to get the overlay, and I'm just going to paint into her eyes like so. Remove the overlay, and then I'm just going to let's have a look here. We can clarity on the eyes. Eyes look great when they have a bit of clarity, and really does add some punch into there. I think we can sharpen them up just a touch as well. And actually I think the left eye is slightly darker than the one on the right, so I'm going to darken down the right eye a touch by clicking new, putting another adjustment brush into here, so you can see now I'm just adding another one in there, and I might just bring down the exposure just so both of those eyes match up. It looked a little bit distracting to me that they're slightly different brightness, so something like that's looking good. We'll come out of the adjustment brush. I might just add a little bit of sharpening now, so we'll come down to the detail. But actually, before I do that, let's just zoom in a touch. Now, because the picture was it was overexposed, we've actually brought the blacks in. There is a, we've shot at 3200 ISO, which for a Canon 5D is pretty much nothing, but there is a little bit of noise in there, so I'm actually going to bring up the noise reduction. I think probably around about 25-ish looks good. It does add a little bit of smoothing in there, but you'll see that later on when we add this kind of texture to her skin, that's actually going to be really quite helpful. So I'm going to bring the noise reduction to 25, and I'm also going to add in some sharpening as well, but not too much. Might go around about 50. We'll do the trick of holding down the Alt or Option key and clicking on the masking slider, so then we can control where that sharpening is. And again, it's only really the face where we want this to be. I'm not concerned about the background, mainly the face, because that's where the actual focus is going to be drawn. So something like that. All right, so that's probably as far as I want to go for now in Lightroom. But what I'm going to do now is head over into Photoshop, because the main part of this first part is to show you how we now cut out Zeyden to put her onto that white background and make it look much more realistic, which, when we look at the portrait, isn't that cut and dried, because she's out of focus now in the kind of like the body areas where we're going to be doing the cutout. So I want to show you a little bit of a trick on that. So let's go to the photo menu. We'll go to edit in, open as a smart object in Photoshop, just again to give us that flexibility to make any changes that we've done already later on. So if we want to change the eyes, we can do, because we've got a smart object. All right, so now that we've got the image open in Photoshop, what I want to do now is cut Zeyden off the background so that we can add in this fake white seamless background behind her. So there's lots of ways we can do the cutouts. So we've kind of covered those in plenty of videos before on this channel, but I'm actually going to use an update in Photoshop CC, select focus area. And what that does, it looks in the picture and says, right, what is sharp and in focus? Obviously, that's what you want to cut out. And it'll select those first of all, as you can see just here. Now, let's go to an overlay. You can see that it's selected the face, which is the area that is mainly in focus. But I need it to kind of like include the rest of her body, so that once it gets to this stage, I can just very roughly paint and say, look, can you include that area as well? And you'll see it does a great job of very quickly selecting it and adding those areas in. So I'll just quickly go up to the ear, add that little bit in as well. Something like that, and we can see the previews now on the same kind of background. Let's go to on white so we can see how it's going to look on that white background. The edge itself isn't looking that good. It's very, very jaggedy, but obviously that should be nice and smooth, blurring out of focus. So what I'm not going to do is come to refine edge and then come in and start using things like the edge detection, so the refine radius tool here, and painting around the edges in the hope that I'll be able to pick up some of those blurry, out of focus and very, very faint hairs. Because you can see when I paint around it, this is the kind of look we get. All kind of horrible weirdness is going on. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to click cancel, but I want to go back into refine edge, refine mask, so that I can do something with this edge. But you'll see now at the top of the screen, refine edge is grayed out. I can no longer go into it. However, when you've got a layer mask, if you right click on it, one of the options that pops up is refine mask. So then I can go now back into the refine mask dialog, and you can do that anytime that you've got a layer mask. So I'm not going to try and pick up all those really fine, blurry, out of focus and light hairs, but what I am going to do is just think about this edge. That's all I'm going to do. So what I am going to do is just increase the radius just a touch, just to see if there's anything else I can pick up. I'm not going to take that too far, but then I'll increase the contrast just to sort of sharpen it up just a little bit more, but then I'm going to blur it by using the smooth. Something like that. So, you know, this is probably as far as I'm going to be able to take it using refine mask, because then what I'm going to do is on the output, I'll leave that to layer mask, click OK. And let's just add a layer beneath this one. So we'll click on new layer, drag it below. In fact, we could also, the way we can do that very quickly is to hold down the Command or Control key, then click on the new layer icon, and you can see it adds a layer below the one that you're working on. So let's just fill that with white, and this is going to be our white seamless background. We'll click OK. We'll click back on the layer mask, and all I'm going to do now is kind of cheat, really. I'm not bothered about the hairs. We're going to sort those out in a moment, but I want this edge to look very, very soft, but also look as if the light from the background is shining back onto it like it would in real life. And we can fake that by just getting a normal soft-edged brush at a 0% hardness, and I'm going to have a black foreground color. And all I'm going to do is just zoom in, and I'm actually going to paint away the edge, but I'm only using the outer part of the brush, so we're just getting a little bit of feathering, removing that kind of obvious outline area of Zeyden, our chimp here. So as I do this, you can see now that it's starting to look, by removing that obvious outline, it's starting to make the edge look nice and soft, but it's also kind of looking, because I'm using the feathered part of this brush, it looks as if we're getting a little bit of a highlight bouncing back onto her. So let's just remove it down here. And this is, yeah, it's cheating, but, you know, all we want to do is make it look as realistic as possible. And this is the way that I found it worked great for this picture. So I'm just going to paint around this top part here, increase the size of the brush just a little bit more, so that we do get a little bit more of that fake highlight coming into her just at the top. Come around the ear just a touch, and paint around that area just there. And I'm doing this really quickly, but this is purely to give you an idea of how I approach this particular picture. All right, so once we've done that, that's kind of like a good starting point for us. It doesn't look realistic at the moment. It does look cut out, even though those edges are soft, because if I hold down my Shift key and click on the layer mask, we can see in the original picture, she had all these kind of very, very fine, faint hairs here, which we couldn't pick up when we tried to do the selection. But what we can do is fake it. And I've done videos on faking hair. We had Aaron Blaze who did a guest video for us showing how he creates fur and hair. But what I'm going to do in here is just create individual hairs just for an element of realism. And I'm going to do this slightly different. So what I'm going to do first of all then is create a copy of this layer by pressing Command or Control J. I'm then going to turn off the original one here. So I've always got that to work on should I make any mistakes in what I'm doing next. Then I want to use the thing called Apply Mask. So I right click on the layer mask and it says here Apply Layer Mask. But I can't use that at the moment because it's grayed out, and that's because we're working on a smart object. So first of all, I'm going to click, well, I'm going to put my cursor just over the name of this layer and right click to bring up this big menu here, and I'll choose Rasterize Layer. So now it makes it a normal layer with a layer mask attached. Then I can go to the Apply Layer Mask, and you'll see what that does. It kind of destructively, if you like, applies that mask to that layer. So she actually is now cut off that background. Rather than having the background hidden, it actually is completely removed. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can now add a blank layer, drag it below, and this is where I'm going to add my hair, those fake kind of individual hairs onto our chimp Zeyden here. And by having it underneath the actual cutout, they're going to appear to be coming over her shoulder and in the distance, rather than trying to use a layer mask to paint them off. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. So now that I've got this blank layer beneath the cutout of Zeyden, I'm going to get our brush, come over to the choice of brushes that we've got built into Photoshop, and one that I've used in previous tutorials, 112. This is great for mimicking the look of individual hairs. So once I've clicked on 112, I click on the brush options here, and this is where I can play around with the settings to kind of get the look of the brush that I want. And I'll see in real time as I change these settings what the brush is going to look like when I use it by what appears in this little preview box here. So let's just turn off some of these, and I'm going to play around with the shape dynamics and the shapes jitter and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not going to get you guys to just sit there while I do this, because you know, we've covered this in previous videos. But what I will say, once you've got the kind of brush that you want, and all I want is individual hairs, make sure that you save the settings so that you can use these quickly later on. And the way you do that is by clicking in the top right and clicking on New Brush Preset. Give it a name, click OK, and then those brushes that you create will appear in the brush presets. And you can see right at the bottom here on the right hand side, if I hold my cursor over it, the name should pop up. There we go. SR Hair Fur. So single hair going off to the right, and it's hair and fur. So click on that. I can now use that brush very quickly. So what we're going to do here is, with this brush active, I'm going to hold down my Alt Option key and just click right at the edge of Zeyden here, so I can pick up that colour as my foreground. And then I'm just start painting in individual hairs like this. All right. So I can just go around the outline here, just adding in individual hairs around her shoulder, her ear, and the top part of her head. Now, the only problem here is at the moment, this is kind of like a fixed brush in the fact that it goes off from the bottom. Let's just press it down. You can kind of see that every time I press it down, the angle changes, but the way it goes off is the same. So it goes at the bottom, curves up, and goes off to the right. Okay, every single brush stroke I lay down. But what I want is to have it going off to the left. Now, you don't need to create a new brush for that. What you can do is just go back into your settings here, click on the brush tip shape, and we have one option here called Flip X. If I click on that, now when I lay a brush stroke down, you can see that it's going from the bottom up and off to the left-hand side, which is great. So we can now really vary the look of the hair that we lay down. So let's just put some more random hairs around like this. Let's come up onto her ear as well. Now, I'm only doing this quickly just to give you an idea of how I faked the look of having picked up some of those really fine hairs around Zeyden. So let's just turn off that Flip X so we get some more of those ones going in there, like so. So this is what I did first of all, but to add a little bit of dimension to it so that it doesn't look like they're all on the exact same line going around her body, what I'm going to do now is go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Then we're going to go to Filter and Blur and Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to bring up the radius to, let's have a look, just to blur these out. So these are going to be ones that are quite far away, around the sort of top part of her shoulder, going over down to her back, something like that. And we'll click OK. Then I'm going to lower the opacity. So those are, you can see those hairs are quite faint and out of focus. Then to add a bit more dimension, what I'm going to do is add another blank layer and then add in some more hair. So again, we'll just start painting around like this. Random sized fur, it's a bit big actually. Random sized fur around here like so. And we'll go up onto her ear. Not forgetting to change that Flip X, and also we can change the actual angle here of the hair as well, by coming in like so. So it really does vary it. Oops, that's a bad one. Really does vary it so that it's not kind of like too uniform. This all helps to add to the realism. All right. So we did loads of those. Again, now this time again, we're going to go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Then we go to Filter, Blur and Gaussian Blur. And we blur it less than we did last time. So I'm going to take these ones down to maybe around about 2-ish. click OK, and I'll lower the opacity on those. And then I'll maybe add a few more of those in. So it adds a little bit more dimension to the fur or the hair rather than it being all on the same angle. So I kind of hope that makes sense. Now, what we're going to do later on in part 2 is using the lens blurs that we've got within Photoshop. And that's going to really help to really emphasize the depth of field here and also help to make this cutout and this fake fur and hair look more realistic. And to give you an idea of that, let's just create a quick combine layer at the top of the layer stack, go to filter, and we'll go to the blur gallery and iris blur. And this is what we'll be doing later on once we've actually done all the colouring and the texture. But I shall be dragging this blur over onto Zeyden's face because this is the area that we want to draw the attention to. Something like, let's just bring it down so that's what's in focus. Something like that. And then we can control how much blur just by coming in actually directly and controlling this little disc here. So we'll take it up to around about 5. So what we're going to be doing in the end, which is in fact what I did in the final image, let's just go and have a look at our final image here, was really increasing that blur so it kind of made those edges look even more out of focus, and it almost made it look like it was photographed using an 85mm lens at, I don't know, maybe f2 or maybe f1.8, all helping to draw the viewer's attention right into her face. I think that's pretty much long enough for this week. Make sure that you check out next week's video, which will be episode 61, where we'll carry on and doing all the texture to make the image, the final image that you can see on the screen right now in front of you. Now, in the meantime, if you've got any questions or comments, by all means, drop me a line to glyn@glyndewis.com or leave us a comment in the section below. If you like the video, and I hope you do, click on the like button and please just share it with other people just by clicking on that share button, whether you're watching this on Facebook, on YouTube, Google+, wherever. Spread the word, and I'll see you next week.